In the state of Arizona, if you're watching this from somewhere else, or if you live here with us in Arizona, you'll certainly understand this. In the Phoenix area, we do not have a storm drainage system. We only get about 6 inches of rain a year, and so it rains a few inches in the fall, called the monsoon, late summer, early fall. It's called monsoon season, and we'll maybe get 3 or 4 inches. And then we get a little bit of rain in the spring and then an occasional rain elsewhere. But most of our rain comes in the late summer, early fall, and then again the spring. In a desert climate in the Bible, they talk about the former and latter rains, and so it's something very similar. So when you only get a few inches of rainfall a year and it only happens every few months, you don't really need a system to drain all the water off and join it with a sewer system and all that. Just becomes really an unnecessary expense. So instead, what we do is, by law in Arizona, you are not allowed to have your water run off onto someone else's property. It has to be retained on your property, or it has to be retained in a communal location. So, for example, we'll have a housing development, and all the water runs out of the yards into the streets and then through the streets, but not into a sewage drain system, but instead into a large dugout area called a retention area. In most housing developments, they cover that with grass and put up a playground so that families can enjoy it like a park. But actually, it's a retention area, and so the rainwater will collect in there and then will percolate out into the ground and evaporate. And so that's what we do with the rainwater. So that's kind of a cool thing, but actually connects directly to something that they would do in the Bible, particularly when it comes to this idea of collecting rain. So let me read from just a few verses in Jeremiah chapter 2, and then we're going to talk about the importance of rainfall and water collection and storage in biblical times. So in Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 10, he says, "Be appalled, O heavens, at this. Be shocked, be utterly desolate, declares the Lord. For my people have committed 2 evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and hewed out for themselves cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water." So I want to talk about this concept of a cistern and what it is and what Jeremiah is saying here. In the Bible, they don't talk about running water or moving water. They talk about living water. So living water is moving water. And it doesn't stand still. It doesn't stagnate. It's not pond water. It's what we can be like a creek or a stream or have a spring. And so when he says they forsake me, the fountain, it's like nice, clear, clean, cool spring water. God says they abandoned that. Instead, they went for cistern water. And then, of course, the problem here is these cisterns are broken. They don't even hold water. And this is a reference to the pagan gods that are like broken cisterns. But what in the world is a cistern? Well, in an arid climate, like the one we find the Bible being written in the land of Palestine, there are really no rivers. You may think the Jordan River, but you are aware that the Jordan River ends at the Dead Sea, which is the lowest point on the Earth's surface. It goes down through a very steep ravine called the Jordan Rift, and the technology that they had in biblical times was not sufficient to irrigate water up more than a mile in elevation from the Jordan River up to their fields. Now, modern technology allows us to do that, but biblical times they did not. And so what they depended on was rainwater or spring water. But the springs sometimes don't run all year. They typically run a whole lot in the springtime as the snow melt up on the mountains works its way down through, there's a lot of limestone and sandstone in Israel, so porous stone, so it works its way through and then it comes out somewhere at a spring. And so there are some springs that are found that were there in Bible times and are still there today. But there was not sufficient water for the springs to take care of everyone's farms and all the water needs that they had. Normally a spring would only be enough for a small community of people. So for most of the land, water was the number one concern. Water for drinking, water for cooking, water for your fields. Water was very, very, very important. That's why the Bible connects water and life so much, because they did live in a dry, desert, arid climate. So what they would do, because there is a lot of like sandstone, a lot of porous, softer stone, they would dig out huge stone vats. And oftentimes would actually have channels that they would cut from like hillsides nearby and this huge dugout hole would be at the lowest point that they could put it, so that that's where all the water would run and would collect inside of this giant hole that they've dug in the ground. So that giant hole is called a cistern. And so you could imagine what Jeremiah is getting at when he calls it, why would you forsake cool, fresh spring water for water that's been sitting in a hole in the ground? By the way, this was very similar to what they did in the prairies with a rain barrel, where they would put a barrel where all the water would run off of like the top of the house into a barrel. They would collect the water in a barrel, in a rain barrel. And so it was the same kind of idea. They're going to collect this rainwater. And if you have a watershed of quite a few square miles that kind of runs down the same location, and you dig a big hole there, you can collect thousands of gallons of water even with just a couple of inches of rainfall over the course of a few months. And so this is what they would do. They would collect rainwater. And so it was extremely important. The Bible has a lot of references to water, and God would send drought as a punishment where there would be no rain. And so cisterns were very, very, very important. So I want to give you an idea of what we mean by a cistern and how big they were. Normally, because it was in porous stone, after they dug it, they would have to plaster it over to try to keep the water in. The best way to do a cistern is if you could dig a hole and then dig underneath, so that it was underneath the ground, so that you would reduce the evaporation rate so that the water would last a long time. And then you would have a staircase that would go down into it. And so as the water would go down, you'd have to go down more stairs to get to the water. And as you come up, you wouldn't have to go down as many. But that's what they would do with cisterns. So Herod built a fortress on the southwest end of the Dead Sea on a big mesa called Masada. Masada had a very ingenious water system to collect the rainwater, and had a number of cisterns all over the top of it. In AD 70, when Titus, the general, came in and destroyed the city of Jerusalem and the temple, there were some Jews who escaped and made their way to Masada. The Romans came and took them 2 years to build a giant siege ramp until they eventually were able to breach the walls and take the top of Masada, and they had committed suicide. And so it was kind of a hollow victory for the Roman soldiers, many of whom would have been parched the entire time. There's just so little water, only about 2 inches of rainfall per year in that area. But on Masada, they had collected just tens of thousands of gallons of rainwater, and they could use that water to farm on top, and in theory they could have pretty much survived without end up on the top of Masada. And so even today you can take a tour of Masada and you can go down into a couple of the cisterns, but there's one called the Giant Cistern on the southern end of Masada. And so I want you to see it because it'll really give you an idea, a sense of what we're talking about, the size and the immensity and how much rainwater they could collect and hold. So here is the big cistern, and yes, that is my wife standing all the way at the bottom. And so it gives you a sense, a perspective of the size of one of these cisterns. And this is only one of the cisterns that was located at Masada. So here is a shot from inside, and so you can see how they dug the hole down, but then dug it out so that the top still has the stone, and of course that would allow you to greatly reduce the evaporation rate and keep the water longer. And you can see the staircase. In Bible times, there would not have been the handrail, but you would come down however far you need on the stairs to reach the water level, and then on the occasional rain, it would basically fill it back up. So to give you a real good idea and sense of how this worked and the ingenious water system that they used, I have just a brief video for you to watch. Sorry. So you can see how huge it was and how important water was. They went to all that effort. So just kind of when you read the Bible now and you read about the value and about living water and moving water, you see you wouldn't want to be drinking water that's been sitting inside of that place, maybe even for a couple of years if you get down to the lower water level. But boy, fresh, clear spring water, man, what a difference. And that's why Jesus talks about, like I am the living waters and I'm the water of life, and how important that was in the ancient world. And even today, water is very, very important. And there are a lot of water conservation efforts that are in place in the nation of Israel because of the scarcity of water that they get. So I hope this helps you as you read a lot about the water and things in the Bible to kind of get a little background and see why it's talked about so much and why it is so important. So God bless you, and hope you have a fantastic day.